Welcome, Lipstick and Logic, episode 3. This is the perimenopausal, menopausal patient and her skin and aesthetics. I'm excited to be here with my partner in life and in practice and in parenthood, the lovely Dr. Sabrina Fabi.
So this is a topic that is of great interest to me, perhaps because I might be in that phase and someone doesn't always know if they're in perimenopause, right? Because that's like a stage that can happen 4 to 8 years before you actually go into menopause, which is defined when you officially have lost your period for 12 months.
Okay, before we get into menopause, though, can we do a quick check?
Okay.
Lipstick check. Lipstick? It's great. Are you lipstick then? I'm logic.
I thought you were lipstick.
No, I am not lipstick. That's
I think
sure.
I have a lot of logic.
I want to bring up something I just saw recently that I read.
Okay.
And this was given to me by Val Monroe, a friend of mine, and reporter and editor and a brilliant voice and opinion in the aesthetic space. And she sent me an article that came from the British Journal of Dermatology, so a very powerful journal. And the article was about the microbiome on the skin and its influence on mood. And I thought that was fascinating because, as you and I know, we were one of the first ones ever to publish on the influence of the skin-brain axis, and we've done a lot of writing on this. I've given quite a few keynote speeches on it. I know we talked about it, and you and I both believe that our skin and our brain are intimately connected. They're both derived from ectoderm, and that's the nerves centers of the brain and the skin evolved at the same time. So we're embodied with multiple nerve endings and neuropeptides in our skin, which we're going to have to do an episode on.
Right.
And an article came out that showed that the bacteria levels, in particular the QT bacterium that's on the skin surface, has a correlation, especially this bacteria on the colonies on the face and in the axilla, a correlation with stress relief and mood. So the higher those colonies are, the less stress and the more pleasantness people feel. Isn't that interesting?
And more attractive.
And they were perceived to be more attractive. Isn't that interesting that a bacteria in the skin, so we've heard about the gut-brain axis, but now there's the skin-brain axis, and you and I have been talking about this for a while.
And the gut-skin axis.
Yes.
I remember when I went to my functional medicine doctor, they actually look at your microbiome of your stool. And that generally is a predictor of what's going on inside your gut. And we know that the microbiome starts to get disrupted as a function of age. And as a result, you start growing like a less than favorable microbiome. And so the question is the microbiome in your gut what's aging you, or is age what's changing the microbiome in your gut? It's like you don't know what comes first. And now we're starting to see the same with that of the skin and the brain.
So it's all connected, huh? And it's interesting because your skin's your emotional organ. And I think we've overlooked this. And I can't believe that all the years of aesthetics, we've never really taken into account the value of the skin-brain axis. The fact that there's all these neuropeptides in your skin, such as dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, oxytocin, are all in your skin, and they influence your brain too.
Right, and what was interesting in this study that was published in the British Journal of Dermatology is that it also influenced how attractive you came or were perceived by others. So that microbiome is potentially also making you more or less attractive.
I mean, the mechanism of action there is that the QT bacterium doesn't allow for opportunistic pathogens to then take hold. And those opportunistic pathogens break down the sebum, and then you can get acne, or you can get other types of inflammatory conditions on the skin. So this bacterium is somewhat protective, so to speak, and it breaks down sebum itself to fatty acids, which are, I guess, more benign than some of these other foods or nutritions for bacteria that can really take over your skin.
Right, and your scent.
Wait, and there was something else that was interesting too. Was that, I think, the same article? No, it was a different article I just recently read that talked about, you go back to your food, what you eat, carbohydrates. The more carbohydrates you eat, the more yellow your skin appears and the less attractive you are. So to your point, what you eat really influences your skin, influences your health, and influences your mood, and they're all kind of interrelated.
And it influences your cognition.
Yeah.
So that's like, I just did another functional medicine appointment with my mom this week, and what her intake of carbs has a direct influence on potential cognitive decline over time. So it all plays a role. So it's, again, a holistic approach to the individual, which is why perfect for keeping it real with menopause.
All right, so let's get to keeping it real. That's the reason why we're here today, because this topic is hot, and I know you've been studying this. You have how many papers on this now?
So right now we've already submitted about 3. And this is a topic that's important and near and dear to my heart, not only because I'm obviously selfish in that, it's something that I'll eventually go through in my life, but also because the average age of the patient that presents to me is about 42.
And for aesthetic treatments.
For aesthetic treatments. So it really ranges. I mean, I have patients that are up until 89, but it's that age where sometimes your skin starts to tell you that things are changing before you actually start showing it in a change in your period.
Wait, your skin tells you, but what, do you feel it?
And yes, so perimenopause and menopause, we discussed menopause is defined as going through a 12-month period where your menses have ceased, your periods have stopped. But before that actually happens, shifts have already started to take place. It usually starts with a decline in progesterone. And progesterone is a hormone that contributes to how well you can sleep and sometimes to your irritability and perhaps not being so irritable. And so what we find is that sometimes that's the first hormone that's replaced in people that are starting to experience these hormonal changes because they may notice sleep disturbance, irritability, fatigue, as well as even hot flashes that can start to come a little bit later because of a decline in estrogen as well. So it's not just estrogen, but there's an interplay of a lot of hormones. Progesterone as well, testosterone, which impacts how strong you feel, how much energy you have. Libido, and your ability to build muscle mass when you're working out. And so we already start to become sarcopenic in that our muscle breaks down after the age of 40 as a function of age, but now add to it the inability to build your own muscle, and then muscle is responsible for a basic metabolic rate.
So you don't think it's just one hormone? It's not just estrogen, not just progesterone, not just testosterone, not just oxytocin. It's a combination of all these molecules?
Of course, just like it's not just your brain, it's your gut, it's your skin, it's your heart, right? But there's an interplay happening with everything. Things do not live in a vacuum. I try to explain that to my patients all the time. They come in for their nasolabial fold, but it's not the nasolabial fold, right? It's their maxilla that's rotating in, it's fat that's repositioning. So it's a combination of things, and perhaps if you've had tooth decay, then you don't have the teeth to support your nasolabial folds. So it's an interplay of things, not just at the micro level, but at the macro level too.
So putting on my evolutionary biologist hat and knowing that I come from that perspective quite often when I look at things, why do women go through menopause? Like there is explanation, there's evolutionary biology or evolutionary psychology reasoning and logic behind menopause, because men don't really go through it. Now they have their components, and we'll get to that as well, but women go through such a stark change when their menses stop. They're no longer able to produce children. Why is that?
I don't know, you're going to tell us.
I'm going to tell you. So from the perspective of looking at the survival of our species, as women, estrogen and progesterone levels go down, as their inability to ovulate and to sustain a fertile pregnancy, they become the caretakers of their children's offspring. So what happens, the theory here is that when a woman delivers, for 9 months she's pregnant, it's difficult to care for herself, it's difficult to fend for herself. The husband, and we're looking primal here. So I'm not talking about modern day Chicago or San Diego. I'm talking primal. We're talking about jungles, savannas. We've been evolving for 3.5 million years.
We're not talking 2025, you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
We're talking a million years ago, 250,000 years when Homo sapiens, and our will to survive is so strong, so that when the man was out hunting, the women would sit around in the community and they would help each other, and they're social beings, and they would help each other raise the children. And a woman who's fertile and ovulating and delivering and getting pregnant every 10, 11 months, every 15 months, whatever it may be, she needs help. And the mother, who's now no longer able to have a child, has a vested interest in her grandchildren surviving, the offspring surviving. So she helps take care of
her genes surviving.
So she helps take care of her genes.
Okay.
And that's one of the theories on it. Another theory is that as a female's estrogen levels drop, or progesterone levels drop, or testosterone goes up, doesn't go up, absolute, but in relativeness to the estrogen.
It's a ratio because testosterone drops, in fact.
Right, it drops quite a bit.
Relative to estrogen and progesterone, it's now higher in ratio than it used to be.
And she becomes a bit more aggressive in nature. She becomes a bit more of a boss, a bit more, she's not as much of a social being, perhaps, is one of the theories. So she's able to direct and dictate a little bit better at that level. So
or maybe she's more comfortable in her own skin at 40.
There it is. So there's an evolutionary psychology or evolution biology reason behind menopause, which is, I find that fascinating. But let me ask you a serious question, and I mean this. Can I talk about menopause? Like, how does a guy talk about menopause to his patients, to his partner in life? Like, what does he say? What does he do? Or is he just like, okay, not going to go there. Whatever you say, I'll just listen.
Well, I think as a physician, so removing the partner hat on and putting the physician hat on, I mean, there's many people that are functional medicine doctors, that are OBGYNs, that manage women that are going through this shift, especially doctors that are in the fertility space, where perhaps now women more and more are trying to conceive in their 40s. Their egg supply is decreasing, perhaps their hormones are not as optimal as they used to be. That might be playing a role. So of course, whether they're a man or a woman, they have to understand this if they're a physician, so that they can better care for their patients.
So do you think a man physician can treat a female going through menopause effectively?
I think they can.
Okay.
Because if they care to understand it and educate themselves, like any other condition, right? Yeah. The reason why a woman wants to look beautiful. Many men take care of women as aesthetic providers, and they manage to get into the mind of a woman and understand her aesthetic desire and what's causing that need. So I would imagine that just from that same lens, it comes from a place of empathy, but also just like anything else, understanding what's happening physiologically so that you can better serve that woman. So part of it is that my patients have made me sensitive to like, they come in, they're like, I feel like my skin aged overnight, or I swear I didn't have this line before, I didn't have this crepiness under my eyes before. And it's even I, who have now been seeing many of my patients for 15 years, I can tell they look a little different, or they're not holding their filler as well as they used to, or they're coming in more frequently. And how much of this is age related, because we know we start to lose bone, it becomes significant at 35, and then how much of it is compounded by the hormonal shift that happens at 40. And so they need to do more in order to preserve whatever that aesthetic baseline was that they used to be able to do with just one aesthetic intervention a year, and now they need to come in 3
So
times
how much
a year.
does aging advance once they start going through these changes?
We know that one of the papers that we published in 2018, which was on estrogen deficient skin, was that specifically when it comes to the skin, beyond the element of the mood and all of the more holistic things that are happening at the level of the skin, sometimes that's what brings in my patients. They haven't even made the connection of the sleep disturbance being possibly hormonally related, or of the mood shift being hormonally related. They actually see what we all see, the cutaneous change, right? And so they feel like they're coming in more than they used to. And so I start to talk to them about the other things. And that's when we identify that there might be changes that are happening. So what's happening? So progesterone, responsible for sebum production. And so...
Wait, but when do you see these changes? What age or what time period?
Generally 4 to 8 years before you actually go into menopause, which the average age in the United States is 51 for that. So you might start to see these changes as early as 43 if the average age is 51. But what if you genetically are programmed to be menopausal at 47? I've had friends that enter it at 44. And so they start to see those shifts in their 30s. So this could very well be that person in their late 30s who's infertile and is wondering what's going on, but they're also seeing, weight gain in the midsection. It shifts from kind of the outer thighs and butt, and now you start to hold more weight in your midsection. And those are some of the shifts that are occurring as a result of a shift in hormones. So progesterone being generally the first one that's replaced at a systemic level in those that are perimenopausal. And so we see a decline in sebum production, which is what causes some of that oil in your skin, making it not be so dry. So the benefit, if you've always had oily skin and have been acne prone, you may not have as much acne anymore, but you may also be noticing that your skin is drier than it used to. So fine lines and wrinkles set in a little bit more readily than they used to, or they're more apparent. Estrogen is kind of like, I tell my patients, the fertilizer of the skin. So it's responsible for fertilizing your fibroblasts, which are the cells that create collagen, elastin, responsible for the thickness of the skin, collagen, and elastin, responsible for the skin's ability to recoil back, the firmness or tautness of the skin. Also for the mucopolysaccharides or glycosaminoglycans, hyaluronic acid.
So the ground substance of
right,
the dermis.
which is what draws in water. Remember, 20% of your HA resides in your epidermis. So no longer able to draw in as much water and look as dewy in the dermis and in the epidermis like one used to. And then we see an increase in our ability, or transepidermal water loss is what we call it, an increase in how fast water is leaving the skin. So it becomes drier, making those lines and wrinkles look more apparent. And that's because estrogen is responsible for creating the lipids that make up the cell membrane that really locks and seals moisture at the level of the epidermis, the top layer of the skin. So you're seeing all these changes. And so some of the first places women notice it is around the eyes, because that's the thinnest skin of the entire body. So it doesn't have the reservoir that maybe cheek skin has. Second place, the neck. They notice that their neck kind of looks like cigarette paper like. And because you don't have as much subcutaneous fat in the neck, it really highlights that change in the skin of the neck. And so these are some of the things that I start noticing that my patients start kind of complaining about. But skin is not just, it also involves the hair, right? And so estrogen is responsible for dilating your blood vessels and creating a little bit of rosiness to the face so it doesn't look as pale, which is a sign of fertility, which we've talked about. But also it dilates the blood vessels that feed your hair follicles. And so women will also notice that their hair is now a little drier. I've published on that as well in 2016. Drier, more brittle. It may not even be gray, it just may be drier. The consistency of the hair changes from like luscious and smooth. And also you have a decrease in hair density. So the number of hairs for a particular area, and then the size of that hair follicle as well.
All right, so I understand that in the first 5 years of the menopause, you have a significant accelerated loss of collagen, skin thickening. Can you talk about that early stages? Because you said the patients are coming in and they're recognizing some loss of skin and some loss of, maybe the thickness of their skin, the ground substance of their skin is going on. How much? Is there a quantity here that you want to believe? Because there's money numbers that are given to me. What do you believe?
So we're going to talk about the ways that you can intervene in the next segment. Yeah. But for this, what's actually happening, we, in our paper that we published, 30% decline in the ability to create new collagen and elastin within the first 5 years of going into menopause. So that means that once you've lost your period, officially 5 years into that, 30% decline. When that's something that generally year by year you're losing about your 2%, you have in 5 years that would be about 10%, but in this time point, it's 30%. So it has a significant impact in those that have not had replacement with hormone replacement therapy. Now, there are studies that we've worked on together that if you do supplement with hormone replacement therapy systemically, which is usually a blend of estrogen and progesterone, then you can actually revert the skin back to a state that's almost perimenopausal. So it's not a lost cause. You can actually get it back.
How important is it to start treatment early within that 5 year period so you catch it before you lose 30% of your collagen?
I think it's extremely important. I would actually argue that the best is to never let the decline set. So, I'm in my functional medicine doctor's office every year because I don't ever want to see the decline. The goal is to cruise through with the same amount of hormones you had in your early 40s, well into menopause and into your 60s. And that really, for me, is the goal. And being optimized, right? So it's not just estrogen, it's having a proper estrogen to progesterone ratio, because you can go into a hyperestrogenic state. And you can end up that can have an effect on your uterus if it's unopposed. So again, it's a holistic approach, which is why it's so important to be seen by an OBGYN.
I want to emphasize again or reiterate some of these changes you see in the face and things that we see. And I know patients come into my office that their skin looks a little bit thinner. There's perhaps more dyschromias or brown and red spots. There's more crepiness or wrinkling in the skin. Their lips are getting thinner. They're losing volume. It's losing some redness as you lose some of the blood vessel vascularity to the superficial layers of the skin. Fine etched in lines. So those are some of the things. The skin, as you said, less elastic. Tell me a little bit more in detail what you're seeing, and if you can describe it and what women will expect to see.
So some of the main things that they're coming in complaining about is like the crepiness around their eyes, a hooded lid, which I'm sure you get as well for like a BLEF consult. Yeah. Sometimes they notice more jowling, changes in their neck skin, lines and wrinkles kind of along the cheeks, and then like a loss in like glow and dewiness.
Yeah.
Which we know is partly driven by estrogen, but it's not just estrogen, it's also oxytocin.
Well, I think that's interesting. I'm going to bring up that point because we had talked, estrogen is the one that always everyone talks about, estrogen, right. Estrogen. But the reality is, as you mentioned earlier, it's a cocktail of different hormones that all kind of drop, including right. Estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, and oxytocin. These are all related. And you and I have a particular interest in oxytocin. We've done a lot of research in that area, a lot of studying in that area. And those estrogen receptors, those oxytocin receptors are upregulated by estrogen, so they kind of work in concert. And when you start to replace things like estrogen, you get more oxytocin receptor sensitivity. You may even elevate your oxytocin levels. And you add more oxytocin, you also get some of the benefits in the mood, you get benefits in the skin quality, you get benefits in attractiveness levels, you get memory, and cognition improves as well, and libido improves. The temperature sensitivity improves. So oxytocin has a similar effect. To that point, testosterone. Testosterone's get cut in half in a female after she turns the age of 40. And when those testosterone levels go down, those are associated with decreased libido, depression, anxiety. All these things are all related. So I think you bring up a really good point. It's not just estrogen we have to replace. We really have to look at this holistically, and for all the other symptoms that are associated with menopause, but the skin as well.
Right. So I couldn't agree more. And I think that that's the reason why for our doctor's notes, the number one thing is you're not going crazy. Mm-hmm. If you're seeing some of these changes, whether it's in your skin or you are experiencing some sleep disturbances, like waking up randomly at 3 a.m. when you used to be able to sleep through the night, or feeling more irritable than you used to, a lot quicker than you used to, your fuse is a little shorter, or getting some of that memory, like brain fog, which a lot of women kind of note, then that's the perfect time to actually go see a functional medicine doctor or an OBGYN that feels comfortable with prescribing hormone replacement therapy, because generally they can start replacing even progesterone first. Some folks even give progesterone. There are other hormones that are involved than just estrogen. And you want to make sure that your labs get checked, that it's not just a prescription and then you never get seen again, because these ratios will change with time. But more and more, treating the symptoms is really what's happening. They may not even necessarily wait for your labs to tank. They may actually treat your symptoms. And I get so many patients that come in saying how it changed their life once I made that recommendation and they started seeing someone and they started taking it. Like, they could sleep through the night again, or they had the energy to go to the gym, or they could actually remember things. They didn't have that brain fog.
Or they're not as irritable, I hear, or they're not as,
right.
Their anxiety levels go down, all by replacing these estrogens.
Yeah,
or these other hormones.
Or even progesterone. Yeah. So I think doctor's note number 2.
It's not a taboo anymore, I'm going to say.
Right.
There's been a long time where it was a taboo to go on these estrogens because of some data out there that was very controversial and suspect. But recently it's been overturned, and there's Marty McCary, the FDA commissioner, has recently released a statement along with an advisory panel looking at estrogen replacement, saying, you know what, maybe this black box warning is not needed, or maybe we need to revisit this, because the concerns we had, the fears we had with estrogen replacement just aren't really showing up. And we think that this estrogen replacements may be really good for a lot of women. It may help them in their health, their cardiovascular health, longevity. So
their brain, it actually has a significant benefit for cognition later in life. So having that consultation is super important so that you can prevent other things from happening later.
So would you say that part of doctor's notes is start early?
So start early, finding someone who does this regularly and is up to date on the literature around it so that they can counsel you properly. And then also recognizing that it's not just one hormone at play. It's like a mojito is not just rum, right? It's a combination of the right amount of rum, the right amount of mint, the right amount of club soda, sugar. You can tell I like mojitos.
It's almost like more alcohol than sugar or something.
But it's the right cocktail, right?
Yeah.
And so that's how the approach should be when it comes to the wellness of your skin. It's being on the right cocktail.
Yeah, and then aesthetically, start early too, would you say?
I would. And that's a perfect segue for episode 3, part 2.
Oh, I can't wait to get to it.